Hey everyone, this is Gnogat. It's been a while since the last video, but Blazing Dominion is coming closer, so I can finally drop some of the content I wanted to do for these two decks, DoomZ and Elfnote. You asked for it in the comments on my other videos for those decks. Will I do Blazing Dominion format content for that? And definitely will do. So today we're going to start with a discussion on which of these two decks you should play in the upcoming format. I'm going to list some pros and cons, and yeah, and then going to maybe leave a verdict in the end what I will do. But for those who asked for combo guides on both of them, they will also follow. I will make a separate video for Elfnote and a separate video for DoomZ, and maybe some other videos for Elfnote for other variants. DoomZ is pretty set in how it's built. But today I just wanted to talk about these two decks and list some pros and cons and then discuss that a bit. And yeah, let's hop in and start with Elfnote. So let's begin with Elfnote. Elfnote is projected to be one of the best decks in the next format, and it is for the following reasons. And that is, first of all, we have Harmonia. This is the new hand trap that we get in the next set. It is practically a Ghost Ogre on a body that also sends another card from your synchro, another synchro from your extra deck. So it has a lot of impact on the board, and it leaves a big body too. So every deck that can play this already has a big advantage, at least as from what we've seen in the OCG. There was a time where I think the top three decks all played this card, Mitsurugi, Elfnote, and Kulturn. So that is that. That is a big advantage of the deck, but also what I think is one of the biggest advantages is you end on this. Caesar plus the trap. You are, I think, gonna start hating this combo because Caesar is generally tough for a lot of decks to just play through, where you have to force the negates, because this is one card to negate and destructions. But if you back it up with a negate like this, you can also make Caesar be protected from something like Fallen into Virtues. They go Fallen into Virtues, you just say Rhapsodia, negate that. Maybe that's their only out. They basically have to draw two outs for the Caesar, or an out for Rhapsodia of Madness and Caesar, and that trivializes a lot of games. So sometimes you will just win games off of your opponent not being able to play through this. We also have Junordo. Junordo is nice because this card basically says if you summon an Elfnote, you draw two cards, discard one. And drawing cards is generally nice because you can draw into your non-engine and so on and so forth. Plus, after he draws, he goes to the extra deck and also searches your card. So a lot of value off of that. And speaking of non-engine, this is my non-engine pile. You can see it's a lot of non-engine. This deck has a lot of non-engine space. So it is more of a classic modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck where you have one-card starters plus a lot of hand traps, and you just gonna go and win the game off of that. So in addition to the non-engine, you have Regina, which is also the new Elfnote monster. And this card you can also use in your opponent's turn now. This is not always the best play, because to summon this, you have to send an Elfnote to the grave. So we'd go, if you have this hand, you send the Lucina, summon this, and then this summons another Lucina from hand. And then you get a bounce during your opponent's turn while having two bodies on the board. But you have 3 cards in hand now. So depending on what the situation is, you either do or do not do it. But it is a nice addition to your hand trap, having the Regina being able to summon itself and then bounce a card or rip a card from hand or something like that. In addition to all of this, we have these 2 cards, which fit very well with this. So if you can extend, you can make more of these, and these are all negates. So the good thing about negates, depending on how you look at it, is that it makes it easier to defend yourself from your opponent's pushes, because a negate just removes the card. It trades 1 for 1, and that means if you have enough negates, then there is not really a big punish for using them, because you just negate what your opponent does, and then they pass over and you beat them. So having Dawn Drexter, for example, to protect your Caesar is also nice. Having the Crystal Wing as another monster negate, and you can sometimes just have more negates than your opponent can play, and that makes the game easier. So overall, for the positives of Elfnote is that it is a more well-rounded deck that is also going to be easier to play. If you play a long tournament, sometimes you will have games where Caesar plus Trap wins the game. You don't have to think that much through it. You'll also have games where you just hand trap your opponent to death, they cannot play, and you go into the next game. So It's not going to be that taxing on you. Now, for the negatives, just a small tangent, I don't like pros and cons list usually because you don't weight. There's no weight to the pros and cons. For example, like having a lot of non-engine is good, but a big disadvantage of Elfnote is that it's bad going second. Why is it bad going second? Outside of hand-tripping your opponent to death, but you need the bodies on board. These are all ignition effects. So let's say you summon to Lucina, your opponent has a removal. For example, they have a Book of Moon, or like a Cup C Yummy Way. They flip it down, you don't get the surge. This is face down in the middle monster zone, and that is already very, very punishing. So going second is a huge downside of this deck. And you can only do so much with hand traps, but if you played Yummy, some people have cut Fuvalos from Yummy from the main deck just because you just want to hand trap your opponent so they can't play. Fuvalos lets them play even though you get draws, but Yummy, at least pure, doesn't push into a board that well, that you can just draw more cards, draw more engine, and play through it. You just want to hand trap your opponent so that they can't play. And this is kind of similar to that. So another thing is we might have this big amount of non-engine, but the deck is a bit less consistent than DoomZ, because if you think about what's the one-card starters, it's Lucina, it's this, it's Immedius. This is not a good starter. This is an okay starter. And then you have 2-card combos with Regina. So you could add Etherealize if you want to, but generally that has been cut because the quality doesn't hold up anymore. So you don't have that many starters. For example, this is only a one-off anyway. Medius, I'm actually thinking of I'm just playing one, and I don't really like that one because Terminus is just a better card, and Regina is a 2-card combo. So you don't have that many good 1-card combos. So it's a bit worse consistency-wise than DoomZ. Another thing that is not gameplay related, but the deck's gonna be expensive because I expect this card to be a lot of money. I expect this card probably to be a secret rare. And the Power Patron stuff we have to see if, because many decks want this, right? All the 3 Power Patron decks want these cards. And so we'll see what rarity Konami will print them at. But this is going to be expensive. Dominus Impulse is going to be expensive still, I think. It's still like 10 bucks, 15. Lucina is, I think, 17 to 20 euros. And this is definitely the more expensive deck. So keep that in mind if you're a budget player. I probably would not consider a Harmonia deck. But maybe they'll print it in common, who knows? Yeah, and then another thing is that people are going to be prepared for this because this is a front runner in the OCG. So people are going to cite things like, what's it called? Soundproofed. If you don't know that card, it's currently being bought out, but it basically prevents your opponent from synchro summoning, and that is really tough for this deck. And lastly, this deck is worse against Charmies than DoomZ, which is generally definitely important because we are generally cutting down on the Fiendsmith stuff. We are back to just the Engraver in this deck to make the Caesar. I don't like playing just one Engraver, but it has been proven to be good just because Caesar is just so good. You just want the one Engraver, make the Caesar, and that's it. So we're going away from the more Fiendsmith heavy list that we had before Blazing Dominion into a more pure Elfnote deck with one Engraver. But that comes with a cost, and that is being that something like Charmies can be tough for you. Although Regina can help you into Charmies. For example, if you activate an effect to summon from the deck and they go Perulia, you can chain Regina and then Perulia, yeah. You can summon Regina into a Perulia so that they don't get the draw off of the Perulia in standby, because this is not just main phase only. So that's the one play. But generally, Fuvalos is tough for this deck. So all in all, that is it for Elfnote. And before I go for the comparison, let's talk about DoomZ. All right, let's talk about DoomZ. So DoomZ is kind of the counterpart to Elfnote, because a lot of the weaknesses of Elfnote are strengths of DoomZ and vice versa. Also, DoomZ is kind of a rogue or T2-ish deck in the OCG, whereas Elfnote is a top threat there. So let's talk about what are the advantages. First of all, you have to talk about Drastius. This is the focal point of the deck. Think of Ryzeal Detonator when Ryzeal still played pure at the beginning. If you end on this, or like let's say this setup, this is already a lot of interactions, especially if you had the raiders to start your combo or go through the combo. If your opponent hand traps you and you just end on this, this is still a lot of interactions, because Drastea with the DoomZ effect can pop the raiders, which pops a monster on the field. It can rank itself up, the Drasteas, and this on summon equips a monster of your opponent. And then whenever your opponent activates an effect of a monster on the field or graveyard, you can negate it and then equip another monster on the field. So that could be either a negate and remove, or it negates something in the grave and just takes a body off the field. Generally, this is already 3 disrupts, whereas the third one is very, very powerful. Plus, DoomZ, when it's equipped or attached to a monster, makes it untargetable, and Drasteas once per turn cannot be destroyed. So very hard to out and very powerful as a disruption, which means that this deck is very good into charmies, because if they charmy you, you can get to add on this. Sometimes you give them 0 draws, you end on this setup, and you have, I don't know, hand traps in hand or whatever, or more engine that you could just place on the field for more disrupts. And then you gave them little to no draws and still have a powerful board, which, if you use your disruptions right, should get you to the next turn and make you able to beat them on the crackback. If you do not get hand trapped to death, or you play through the hand traps, you don't get charmied, you actually end on a very powerful board. So even if the floor of this is already very high, the ceiling is also not that low, because generally every 1-card combo ends on something like this. You have the Verodras, you have F0 or Regulus, depending on what engine you decide on. You have DoomZ Destruction, which is a very, very powerful card. I'll get to that in a second. And you have the Drastea setup. So let's talk about DoomZ Destruction. Similarly to how in Elfnote, Caesar plus Trap can just sometimes win games, DoomZ Destruction can also sometimes just win games, especially if you back it up with Verodras as an Omni-Negate. But even without, this card just says you activate it, you equip it to a DoomZ Xyz monster, and your opponent cannot add cards from the deck except via drawing them. So this is basically Ash and Droll in one card. They activate, say, Kitu, you chain this, they don't get to add, and for the rest of the turn, they also don't get to add anything. And if you equip it to Drasteas, for example, which is very hard to out, it is a very tough board to break already. So floor-wise, this deck is already very, very good. Now, another big advantage of this deck is, as opposed to Elfnote, this deck is good going second. I have the Zegredo out here because Zegredo is kind of the poster child for that, because Zegredo is a pendulum scale, a lot of text. I know it's scary, but generally you can scale this, and the pendulum effect says you can destroy a DoomZ card and this card, and then you can non-targeting pop a card on the field. So basically you trigger a card in your hand that would also trigger. You pop it, you pop a card from your opponent, for example a Caesar, and then this pops itself, goes to the extra deck. If your opponent decides to remove this because it's too scary, threatens the Caesar or whatever, if this gets added to the extra deck, which it will if it gets popped, then it adds you a Power Patron or DoomZ Spell Trap. So that means, no, DoomZ Spell Trap or Power Patron card, which means it doesn't matter if they pop it or not, it will go to the extra deck, and then you will get a card that is a 1-card starter. Terminus is a 1-card starter for this deck, so you can just use this, get a 1-card starter, and you always trade positively with this, unless they just negate it on the field, and then it sticks here and you can't pop it. Although other DoomZ card could also pop this, so generally this trades very, very well into boards. And if you somehow get to summon this, it also has the on-field effect to pop itself and go into Jupiter, which can then attach something from your hand. So because of this as material, it can revive a DoomZ monster. But again, this goes to the extra deck, you get to add a card, and you have a big body on the board as well to run into boards and maybe make a Zeus, I don't know. So very, very strong going second. And speaking of going second, this card exists, this deck can play it, do with that information what you want. Now, for the disadvantages, the biggest one that I've seen with this deck is it is not very layered. So if you have board breakers, Forbidden Droplet is very, very good into this. Then you can break the board and then it's hard to actually play through stuff. You can play around Droplet a bit if you go into Drustius during your turn, because Droplet doesn't prevent your trap. So if they Droplet you can still draw them basically. But that is a cold comfort if your whole board gets broken. So there's that. Another thing is that the deck is a lot harder to play than Elfnote. You have less non-engine space, so you can't just throw your hand traps at your opponent. You have to be selective about them and then know where you can break the rest of the board with engine. And during a long tournament, that means you can make more mistakes with this deck, and that should be made aware of. Another thing is that it is very bad into back row. Most of the cards pop monsters. I think the new XZs pops any card on the field, but you can't really. You could play Tornado Dragon, but making a rank 4 in this deck is not that easy. It's not trivial. So against Radiant Typhoon, for example, is a horrible matchup because Radiant Typhoon plays breakers and it plays a lot of back row. So you are not very good into the deck. Plus MST just gets rid of your equips and then you cannot play the game. Another thing is that if you don't get hand trapped, which Radiant Typhoon wouldn't do, every one-card combo ends on the same board. So if you have extra pieces, you oftentimes don't convert these extra pieces. You want your opponent to hand trap you so that they basically hand loop themselves and you end on still a good board and they have limited resources to break that board. If they don't hand trap you, you will end on the same board that the one-card combo does, and sometimes you will have one more name with an equip on the field, which amounts to another pop on the opponent's turn, which is not very much for a full engine hand. So keep that in mind with this deck. Very, very low to the ground kind of deck, if that's your deal. So generally, summarizing it, it's a very good deck going second, very low to the ground deck, but has issues with breakers, has issues if it doesn't get hand trapped, and is hard to play. So that's it for Doom. So which one of these should you choose and when? Now, if you are a competitive player and you want to play the best deck available, Elfnote is probably the easier pick. It is easier to play. It is proven to be more powerful. Sometimes the games end on their own, and it can play Harmonia, which can trivialize matchup. Plus you have a lot of hand traps, so you are flexible into a myriad of different matchups, whereas, for example, DoomZ can have matchups where it struggles a lot. Of course, on the other hand, people are going to be prepared for Elfnote, so keep that in mind, and it's going to be expensive. I'm pretty sure this deck is going to be very expensive. It's going to be popular, second most popular deck to Cool Tune, maybe, from the new decks, and it already has some secret rares, and it will get Harmonia. DoomZ, on the other hand, is if you're kind of the more rogue hipster type of player, which sometimes I am, and then this is a very nice pick because generally people won't be siding targeted stuff for DoomZ. They will have generic stuff like hand traps, which you are very good into. It is going to be cheaper. I don't think anything here in this deck that I have, except for the Starlight, which you don't need, was money. And the only thing that could be money is if they decide to make Terminus an ultra rare as well. And on the other hand, it's also a very cool deck to play if you like going second, if you like having small boards. For example, if you are a former Dracotail player, this could be something for you because this also ends on smaller boards and is very good at breaking boards itself. You can also, I have some hand traps in this one, but you can play this as a breaker deck if you want to. Which is nice. In our testing, we had a breaker version against Cool Tune. It's nice if you set your whole hand, they cannot rotary because you don't have a hand, they can't look at your hand, which is very nice. So that would be an advantage of DoomZ, very low to the ground, cheaper, but is also a lot harder to play, in my opinion. So that is it for these two decks. Let me know in the comments which one of these you are eyeing and why, and if you already gotten your course. So with that being said, see you next time.